Good afternoon. Welcome to the Midday Mull for Saturday, the 30th of January. Reading in Genesis 31, we have the story of Jacob fleeing from Laban. He'd heard his sons talking and saying everything Jacob had used to belong to our father, and he felt threatened, understandably. He calls Rachel and Leah to him out in the field, and he says, I think we need to leave. Your father's attitude to me has changed. And they agree. But I was struck by a couple of verses in Genesis 31. In verse 10, he says to them, in the breeding season, I once had a dream in which I looked up and saw the male goats mating with the flock were streaked, speckled, and spotted. The angel of God said to me in the dream, Jacob. I answered, here I am. So he has this encounter with God, and God speaks and says to him in verse 13, I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and where you made a vow to me. Now leave this land at once and go back to your native land. Now for me, leave this land at once means I'd wake up in the morning and you'd say, okay, we've got to get our things together, pack the bags, and let's go. God said, leave at once. It doesn't seem like Jacob did that, because he says to the family, in the breeding season, I once had a dream. He's talking past tense. He's not saying I had a dream last night. He's not even saying I had a dream last week. That's back in the breeding season. And that got me wondering about how we measure and pace our lives. And in the modern world, we tend to be driven. We have deadlines to meet, and we want instantaneous solutions. And if we have to wait for something, we get impatient. And we all want whatever we're looking for yesterday, preferably. And that's the world we live in. Jacob is told by God, go home, and he takes time until finally it comes together and he goes. And I'm not convinced that God is a God of rush and hurry. Because as I was thinking about it, when he created the world, he could have said, let the whole world exist, and it could have happened in one day. He took 6 to do it. There's no good reason why it should have taken 6. Just God worked in a measured way. Likewise with Christ. It is quite possible that Christ could have come down as a fully grown man to earth on Monday, met everybody, called a whole lot of people, told them stuff, died on the Tuesday. And he could have achieved what he needed to achieve, but he didn't. He came down as a baby. For the next 30 years, we had just about nothing of his life. And when he starts his ministry, it then takes another 3 years to accomplish what he's wanting to do. God doesn't seem to be in a rush. We are. God isn't. Now, I'm not suggesting that procrastination is a virtue, but I'm not sure being pressured is that much of a virtue either. And I would suggest that what we need to do is to have a slightly more measured approach to life. And one of the upsides of COVID is I think it's forcing people to do this. It's changed our time schedules. It's changed how and when we do things. And my prayer is, as Christians, as we go through life at the moment, we will reflect on how we do things, whose drum we march to, and let us listen to God and let him guide us and set the pace. And I'm convinced that as we do that, we won't be nearly as pressured as the world would have us be, but we will be just as blessed. So know God's presence, know God's pace, and know God's blessing.